So when I took 2 weeks off, Asmongold had made a bet with Zeplo that he could be through a ultimate before Endwalker dropped. Now that did not mean also through MSQ, but I do think there's a fair bit of pressure there for him to push through that. And as somebody that has been going as thorough and careful as he has, it is good to see he has finished A Realm Reborn. He is into Heavensward. I don't know his exact status right now. I'm just catching up on VODs and things like that. Just catching up on enjoying all of the minimum item level stuff he does and everything he has been doing. And on ZachRAR, his personal channel, Zach has put up his review for a Final Fantasy, A Realm Reborn. So I am looking forward to catching up on everything that has gone down in the last 2 weeks. And his progress is definitely one of those things that has become a bit of an event and one of those really fun ways to kind of represent a new player in the space and growth in the space. And, you know, I know he's just one person, he's just Zach, but I think it stands for what a lot of people are experiencing, and he does seem to have very well thought out views that are very on point, typically.
What's up, boys? About a month ago, I started playing Final Fantasy XIV, and a few days ago, I finished A Realm Reborn. Today, I want to give you a review of that experience. I went through the whole story. I went through all of the post-A Realm Reborn content. I did all of the raids, including all of the ones on Extreme with minimum item level and no echo in order to have as much of an authentic experience as possible. Did not do Savage Coils yet, however. And I have had a very good time. I think that I've actually really enjoyed myself. And before I get into, just in general, why I feel that way, I want to explain kind of what I went into it with the perspective of. Because going into Final Fantasy XIV, as I'm sure a lot of you guys know, I had a million people telling me, oh, you should play this class, you should play on this server, you should play this way, you should keybind this way, you should play in this with this action bar, you should play with this add-on, you should play with a boost, you should not boost, etc. Right? I had a million voices in my head, and well, a million more voices in my head. And I just was going insane having these people try to tell me exactly how to play a video game. And at a certain point, I just told myself, well, listen, I'm going to play it the way I want to play it. I'm going to do it the way I want to do it. And I heard a lot about the story of Final Fantasy XIV, and I felt to myself that this is a game that is primarily driven by that story, by that narrative process, and that's really what I want to focus on. So I played a lot of the game primarily as a single-player game. I went through the quests, I read everything involved.
Now I want to stop right there and say that prior to playing the game, one of the things he had stated is that his own joy in games is about gearing out your character, taking on the hardest stuff, the battle content itself, the combat system itself, this kind of texture you feel by controlling your character, and that the narrative is these sprinkles or this icing on a cupcake, as he had put it, where it is something that adds flavor, and that if there is enough goodness to the base content of the game, to the battle system and all of that, it doesn't need that icing, and that you would never go to a cupcake shop and be okay with just getting the icing. You need that core cupcake. And so to see him, I think a lot of people were very concerned that he would come in and would not give any of this flavor a fair shake when Final Fantasy XIV has spent, compared to other MMOs in the space, a lot of effort on this icing. And it is icing. For people that say the game is just story-based in its entirety, it's not the meat, because when you look at people that have 3,000 hours, 5,000 hours, 10,000 hours in this game, story represents single-digit hundreds of those hours. It really is that last little bit, but that last little bit is something they've spent an immense amount of effort on, and they have designed the entire cupcake to be something that helps accent and create a good space for that icing and those sprinkles. So to say, you know what, I could just leave without, oh, please don't, definitely get the icing. And so there was a concern that he would miss that, and then by him missing that, he would set an example for him, his community, all of the just the visibility that him playing this game has, and would put out kind of statements that say like, oh, this game isn't even that great, but he didn't get to taste it with its full flavor profile. And so I think the fact that he has come in and said, when I'm in a space that I don't know, I try to be respectful of that space and take it on as it is, right? When in Rome, this idea that I want to come in and I'll try it their way. And then once I have some context, I'll try it my way. And then if it's not for me, it's not for me. And he's been very open about saying, if it's not for me, it doesn't mean it's not for you. It doesn't have to be the be-all, end-all, but with the amount of visibility that his progress through the game has had, of course it does carry more weight than maybe he wanted it to. At least originally, hopefully he's kind of enjoying at least some aspect of the intention around it, because if not, I cannot imagine the stress that that would add if he didn't really want that. He wants to be an entertainer for a living, but it has become a huge spectacle around Asmongold progressing through this game. And I do think that there is something to be said for how he's doing it, showing his actions show so much more about his respect. He makes a lot of jokes and he has a great time and he wants to be an entertainer, but underneath there are a lot of people who have spent hours and hours watching him that say underneath he really does want other people to have fun in games. He really does want other creators to have their own communities in their own space, and his actions are so much more respectful and are so much more in line with somebody who ends up being an industry leader on Twitch than maybe your initial view of a 30-second clip of his persona might give you. And so you do start to be like, well, how does somebody that has that much influence on the space come in and be respectful of the impact that they might have? And I think he's done an incredible job with that.
Involved, and the ironic thing is that if I wasn't streaming it, I would not have done that, and I feel like I've had a better experience because I did stream it, which is usually not the case with streaming video games, because whenever you're playing it off stream, you'll have more time to take everything in. But the reality is I know myself, and I wouldn't have read the stuff in the same way that I did whenever I saw it and I did it on my stream and experiencing it with you guys. So I want to talk to you guys all about where those high points were, where the low points were, and just in general kind of how I felt about the whole story. Now, if you want to take a broad approach to the Final Fantasy story, I find that one thing that's very interesting about it is that there are very few characters and very few forces in Final Fantasy that are purely chaotic evil. And if you want to look at the Dungeons & Dragons alignment chart, there are very few pure evils in Dungeons & Dragons. There's a lot of them, but in Final Fantasy, there are actually very few of those. And oftentimes, as you learn more about the story, you'll learn that many times the evil is misunderstanding, or the chaotic nature of something is misunderstood. And I find that to be very interesting, and I think also it lends itself to telling much better stories in terms of redemption and also in terms of retribution, because I find that to be much less common in Final Fantasy than it is in, let's say, World of Warcraft. And I've noticed that in many cases with the game, that this character that does this terrible thing is granted, they atone for their sins and they're sorry and they willingly turn themselves in. And I think that degree of redemption and that degree of kind of I think true moral grayness is it lends itself to creating a more compassionate player base in a way, because I think that gives people the narrative idea inside of the story that sometimes whenever people do things that are bad, you might not necessarily understand exactly why these things are happening. And so it's kind of interesting to
It's interesting to hear this perspective. Of course, they have a better written story because they come from a narrative franchise as opposed to more of coming in where World of Warcraft came in and said, hey, we're going to create this RPG multiplayer space surrounding this battle-based game that we have, this franchise that was inherently conflict-based and was about controlling and dominating battle, and the story was the flavor. And so it is interesting to see him read it in that way. I will say, as a longtime member of the community, there are aspects of this community that can struggle to be very tolerant and don't really care why you are a story skipper. You're simply wrong. Or don't really care why you used a boost. You're simply wrong. And so there definitely are elements of this community that are not as tolerant as what he is describing and have been over the years. And it's a vocal minority for sure, but it is one to be acknowledged, because what happens is somebody runs into that group and they're like, well, if everybody's so good and they're being mean to me, it must be me, and maybe I'm not welcome here. And that's just not true. You just happen to have found one of the jerks. There are jerks in any community. But I do think it's interesting that he's caught the theme, because I do think there is some merit to the fact that on the development team, you've created this mindset. I don't know, in my opinion, as much as it is about the customer, about the player being somebody who has this mindset, though it may very well have fostered a group of people and pushed away people who don't like that. This isn't for me, or this is for me. It may have hand selected a little bit, but I have a brother that works in and around the airline industry and has mentioned that certain airlines are known for certain personality types. And while customers may gravitate towards those, customers may also pick a flight because it's going where they need to go, when they need to go there, or it's a price thing or whatever, or they have points or their company's booking it, or it doesn't matter. There's a ton of other factors on why they'd pick it, just like people might pick Final Fantasy even if they don't give a crap about the story or about PvP or about high-end rating or whatever aspect just isn't for them. But to the company, what ends up happening is when they have these personality traits, one of the airlines that he and I were discussing was a airline that is known for speed, and they're known for, we're going to make it quick and easy to buy our tickets. We're going to make it quick and easy to board. We're going to take off early. We're going to land early. We're going to get your bags to you early. Everything's going to be fast. And that sounds really good. But there are pros and cons to this. And so what ends up happening is once you've created a culture, it becomes very pervasive in the areas that it should be and in the areas it should not be. In his example, it was that also those pilots tend to land faster than the recommended speed limit for these runways. They come in and they are going too fast at the time of landing and too fast by the time they reach the end, which is a safety concern. But what it ultimately shows as an example is what happens when you have a culture that starts with something good and you let that wash over your entire company. And in his example, you have an idea of redemption. You have to remember this was a team that was actively continuing to support 1.0 while developing 2.0 in a roughly 18-month cycle, where they did not initially tell the player base this is what they were going to do. Then they had to take the game offline, all at a time that Square Enix was struggling to stay in business, to relaunch and redeem a game that was filled with devs who did care and did work hard, but it didn't add up. They weren't saying, oh, well, if devs just care, it'll be good. No, the devs did care. It wasn't good. Well, it's not just if they work hard, it'll be good. No, they did work hard. It wasn't good. But we need to redeem their initial intentions and their initial idea into something that is much more in line with the quality metrics that we want to be associated with the feature list that players are looking with. We need to look to other games in the space. We need to look to what worked and what didn't. And we need to look at what was working with 11 and what wasn't. And we need to redeem and create this a realm reborn, this rebirth in its very nature. It was an opportunity for them to be reborn, and in the story is an opportunity for it to be reborn. And so I think I would take it even one step further back than what Zach is saying and say this is something that is washed over the devs, and as a result can trickle into policies like how they deal with people that are griefing other players, how they deal with when we have people that are abusing the game somehow, what do those bans look like? Are they forgivable? And looking at this tolerance and understanding. And so I do think there is something where their goal is to create a space that is tolerance and understanding. And the only thing they are intolerant of is when something is getting in the way of that. When something is giving somebody not a chance to explore their journey with this game, they have zero tolerance for anything in the way of this rebirth. They are intolerant of intolerance, and so there is this hard ban line. But up until then, you see the devs come out and say it's not wrong to story skip. It's not wrong to be a high-end player. It's not wrong. And in this tolerant base where you see story people come out, the writers, and take these interviews, and they're asked about when the player base feels a certain way about a character, does that align with their character? Or in an upcoming expansion, what is the theme? And they continually shy away from giving these hard answers because they are saying, no, if I wrote something one way and you experienced it another, but it makes you love this game and have fun in this game and it's positive, then it's still a success. And that with the millions of people playing all over the world, they're experiencing this game in ways we could have never dreamt of. And that's amazing. And so there is this tolerance and acceptance right up until it's not. They're very, very strict on griefing. But right up until it's not, there is this idea that as long as you're not hurting anybody else, you're fine. As long as you're not hurting anybody else, you are welcome and you belong here. And so I think I would take it one step further, all the way up to the dev team, as something that does align. That unless you are identifying as that kind of chaotic, evil character, that this kind of unredeemable one note, unless a player is identifying as that, you're 100% welcome here.
See how the player base is different from other MMOs. and see how some of that could be reflected from the narrative storytelling inside of the game and how that imprints onto the player base. And I think for me personally, the high points in the story, I had a few high points in the story, definitely. I thought the one thing that was so fucking cool was Garuda, right, with the song and the music and everything like that. The fight itself was okay, it was fine, but I really liked the song for it and the music. And then later on, doing Ultimate Weapon on Extreme, I thought that.
Remember when he said he wasn't sure if he'd like the music in this game? I'm really glad that a track has spoken to him, because Final Fantasy XIV has more tracks in it than any other game ever. And so odds are there's one in there for you somewhere. I'm glad he found one in A Realm Reborn.
That was really, really cool, just because of how flashy and just absolutely dazzling it was. And in the story itself, the narrative itself, when did I really find myself attached to it, and when did I really care? I think the first time that I found it to be very interesting, and I really thought it was cool, was in the Coils of Baphomet, or whatever you call them. Whenever, Alphanod the Redditor and his sister, Alice, they meet their grandfather, Louis Swan, and they're like, well, what the fuck happened? Like, how is Baphomet still alive? I thought you killed him. And, what happened all those years ago in Calamity? And then it just he just looks to the side, and then it fades out, and it plays a full fucking CGI cinematic of this guy literally turning into a phoenix, a primal. The guy himself turns into a fucking primal, and it turns into a fucking Kamehameha bolt, pierces Baphomet's heart, fucking basically almost kills him, and then rebirths the entire world. And to see that in an actual cinematic, whenever you don't really know what happened, it's very gray, and then just find the story and realize that something that you thought was evil or whatever was actually just the most pure action that you could possibly take. I think that was just so incredible and so cool. And that was, in terms of like what's the word for this? In terms of a theatrical perspective, I think that was definitely a high point. But if you want to talk about like what really got me and what really made me feel like this story is fucking cool and this is like really special, is actually whenever you were going to the top of the fallen airship. Apparently there was like some big war, and the dragons interceded in the war, and it's this like giant dragon, like Midgard Sommer, like wrapped himself around like the main like flag.
Apparently there was some big war is like my favorite. That would be like the best opening line to like the minstrel getting you into some extreme. Like there's like an extreme replay of one of these battles, and it's like, well, so apparently there was some big war.
Ship, and the flagship went down, and it killed everybody on the ship, obviously, and also killed the dragon. And but the dragon wasn't necessarily dead. Nobody really knew what was wrong with the dragon. Nobody knew what was going on. But there was an idea that the dragon was calling to the other dragons to attack this other place. So you go up, you ascend the top of the ship, and you finally get to the top of it, and you see the dragon, and the dragon's eyes turn red, and it starts talking to you. And the dragon, it was supposed to be fucking dead. And now you're just having this conversation with this dragon. And what I thought was so fucking cool about that is that, especially even in a game like Final Fantasy, it becomes even harder to do this, is that you have these moments in certain stories where the storytelling takes a story that has a scope of this and it turns it into this. And it's so hard to have a moment like that and have it be as pure and as sublime as it has to be in order for it to really have that real pure impact and that real emotional response.
Yeah, I think it's really hard in an MMO, because in an MMO you can't, like in a single player game, you can wipe a city off the map. In a single player game, you can kill a quest giver that is centrally located in town. In a single player game, you can move the narrative forward. In a story that's told through TV or movies, you can do whatever you want. And there are people that are cynical on why they don't, but like that's what made the initial seasons of Game of Thrones so significant, is that they can do whatever they want. But in an MMORPG, you have to maintain the state of the world. There's some instancing technology and stuff that you can leverage, but usually it's done through like the initial rollout of an expansion, because most of the time you want people, when they pass through a capital city, to be in the same state of that capital city so that you see other players. You don't want it to be the game is maintained across 15,000 states, and so you're always in a state where you only see the 6 other people unless you're absolutely at the last current available state before the next patch. And so you end up with, narratively, being stuck in positions where you can't always tell crazy stories. Players' ability to choose is often very, very limited. Because we can't like choose not to fight the final boss of a dungeon. We can't, and the final boss has to be the person that it is. So if we're going to fight Zack at the end of a dungeon, we have to fight Zack at the end of that dungeon, and we have to get there. And you could write it so that some characters feel like they got there begrudgingly, and some players feel like they chased him down. You could write it so that there's a little bit of a different tone, but ultimately we have to fight him, and then every fight either has to end with him hitting 0 HP or hitting a point where he enrages and storms off, or whatever, or turns into a dragon. And like, that is just the way that's written, just in MMORPGs. So I do think it is impressive sometimes that Final Fantasy can get to this point where it feels like the story was written for me the player, and it feels like you're alone in these moments, even if it pans around and you see other characters. There are moments like that, without talking any spoilers in anything he hasn't gotten to, where you feel that it was written for you. And so he's only talking about A Realm Reborn here, and so the moments I'm thinking of are after that, but there are moments that you feel like it's uniquely yours. And whether or not it's what you wanted to happen, that you feel okay with it happening, you feel justified in it happening, and it opens your eyes in a way that is somehow able to exist while simultaneously, when that cutscene ends, you're back on some platform with whatever NPC you were talking to, and the person that was standing next to you before is still freaking standing there. And when you go back to the capital city, it's the same capital city that it was before. And so I do think it's impressive that they can hit those emotional notes when you have people that are at different points in their journey. That I can be in a dungeon with somebody who has not experienced something, and somebody else who's already ahead of me, and I'm somewhere in between, and all three of us can coexist and be attached to this game.
And I actually think that they did an incredibly great job with that. And that's where I really kind of got hooked, because I think to myself, like, where is the moment that takes the scope of what you experience, and it takes the mysticism and the mystery and the fantasy of the universe that you're part of, and it just multiplies it. And I thought of a few examples, right? I think that in terms of like a personal example for me, it was whenever I was off the coast of Westfall in World of Warcraft, and I just started swimming in a direction, and I found the Gurbashi Isle, and I thought I ran the game at level 11 or level 15 or something, and then I see these guys are level 63 elites, and I'm like, oh my god, I had no idea what I was talking about. This game is way bigger than I could ever imagined. And if you want to talk about like narratives, like where's another narrative that kind of had this same idea? I can come up with like two examples that are very good, I think, to prove my point. I think that the first example is in Lord of the Rings, whenever Gandalf comes back in the Twin Towers, excuse me, the Two Towers, and he comes back, and they thought he had died, and he just, shows himself, fucking disarms everybody else, Gandalf, or, Aragorn, Gimli, and Legolas in just a split second, and he's like, I'm back, I beat the fucking Balrog. And this was just like, oh my god, right? Because you would have never expected this to happen. And it's like, it takes the scope of what Gandalf is, what he represents, and everything, and it just makes the world so much bigger. And you have it that occurs in, again, like this very pure and this very, in a way, straightforward and sublime way. And
you can't do it too often, right? It loses something. What makes these moments significant is that he named one in Lord of the Rings. You can't have it happen over and over and over and over. So I will say, looking forward, keeping this spoiler free in this is a review for A Realm Reborn, not Heavensward, Stormblood, or Shadowbringers. Endwalker is going to wrap up the story. That is a well-known public fact. So from A Realm Reborn, wherever that picks up with whatever 1.0 pieces it takes in, a player jumps into 2.0 as the critically acclaimed trial, carries it all the way through to 5.55, the current last end of the story patch until we go into Endwalker, plays the 6.0 story. Prior to 6.1, they will have wrapped up the story. You can't have a finale over and over and over. What makes Endwalker so significant is this is the finale. This is years into in the making. And so you have these moments where he's talking about it building to something that requires an immense amount of patience on the writing staff to know that literally the finales they could be building could be a story they don't get to write because they've moved on to another job, could be something that may or may not come after the game is in a better or worse state. They don't know if 2 expansions from now there's going to be more players or less. That you have to hold on to this. Even when players are saying, I want more, you have to say, just wait. And so I do think there's an immense amount of planning that goes into making sure that Final Fantasy gets to be what Final Fantasy needs to be, and not what any one writer or any one player wants right now. It's something that can wait for those payoffs.
I think that's just what's so special about stories like this. And another example of this that I can use is the clips in Berserk. Whenever, obviously, like Griffith, this is I think that it might be obvious here, but there are going to be a lot of spoilers in this. So if you don't want any spoilers, you're probably already mad. But step away.
Oh yeah, sorry. Spoiler content. If you haven't seen Lord of the Rings and you haven't played A Realm Reborn, we're 9 minutes in, and I'd like to stop for a second.
Play now. And anyway.
So apparently there was a battle, and apparently there were spoilers.
Griffith ascends to becoming a member of the God Hand, and he becomes Femto. And all the way up until then, you were just fighting, Guts was fighting, and Griffith fighting the Band of the Hawk, fighting like different random mobs. They fought Nosferatu Zod, but it was just like some random guy. And the Eclipse, where you literally see, Void and Slann and all the other members of the God Hand, and they're just there. And it just fucking happens, and it completely turns everything on its head. And again, it takes a world that's like this, and it makes it like this. And I think that moment there really fucking got me. And that's something that I fucking loved it, man. And the thing is you have other stories that try to have a moment like that. But the reality is that a moment like that occurs in a way naturally. And whenever you force it, it's not real. And I think the best example of a moment like that was forced is obviously whenever Sylvanas breaks apart the Helm of Domination and opens up the sky of the Shadowlands. And of course it does have that literal earth-shattering perspective to it, but it doesn't have that emotional connection where like you are, it's like the painting where like, man touches God. And it doesn't have that divine presence to it that I think a lot of the other previous examples did. And actually, I think when all of those examples, literally a divine presence. But the point is that's the point in the story where I really, really was engaged. And I thought that was really special and really cool. And other than that, I want to say the story in general, I think, was much better than what I had expected it to be. I think that especially for an MMO, I can see why so many people they're invested in the story and why so many people care about it so much. And I'm not surprised. I think that it's incredible. I think it's very well designed. And I'll be honest, there are many cases in the story where I was very angry. I was like, just fucking kill him. And, I think I probably would have been right, to be honest. But that's the way the story goes. And it does make me very excited to see what Heavensward is going to have as well. Now, whenever you talk about like the combat itself, I think that the 2.5 second GCD, I knew, assumingly, like this is, people said the raids were hard. Like, there's no way somebody's going to say the raids are hard whenever you can only hit one button every 2.5 seconds. So I knew that there was more to it than that, and big surprise there was. I think the raids in general are very well designed. They're definitely not, at least the Realm Reborn ones, and again, this is excluding Savage Coils that I have not done. The Realm Reborn fights do not have the same type of like mechanical and DPS requirements that something like Mythic Castle Nathria or Mythic Sanctum of Domination would require in World of Warcraft. But I think that it's kind of like comparing something that came out in like Wrath of the Lich King raids versus the Realm Reborn raids, and in that case it's much more of a closer comparison. So I do really look forward to doing more of the raids, and I felt like it's funny because as a tank, usually you just sit there and tank, right? That's about it. But we did Ramua, or the Forest Lord, the Lord of Levin, and we did him, and it was like, again, right? This is what I used to have to do as a tank. Now I have to do this. And I'll admit, there was a little bit of growing pains there. It was hard for me to do, but I'm glad that I did. And I look forward to doing more fights like that as well. I think that there's a certain degree of overcoming challenges and winning in that way, especially whenever people know that something is difficult, and to overcome it like that, that's fulfilling to me, that I do find fun. And I think that a lot of my audience enjoys it as well. So I do really enjoy the raids. I think that's probably, if I had to say, like, why do I really, really like playing the game, besides the Gold Saucer, why do I really, really like playing the game? It's because of the raids. I think that the raids are the most enjoyable thing for me. They're the most fulfilling thing for me, and they feel the best whenever we complete them and whenever I get better gear. There's like little small things, right, where like I wish that the numbers in the game displayed differently, kind of more like World of Warcraft. I feel like the truth is that Classic WoW, I think, has the best floating combat text of any game pretty much ever. And I'd love to see, every other game from the future, from the rest of the time, just take what Classic WoW does and just do that. But overall, it's not that big of a deal. And I do think that the less of an emphasis on damage meters in general and damage in general does allow players to focus more on the mechanics and take in the aesthetics of the fight rather than the specifics of the fight. And I think that does make for a more holistic experience.
I wouldn't mind seeing a little bit of feedback when I'm doing things right, so that it became an option. So it could be as simple as a damage meter like PvP, where it shows at the end of the encounter and kind of says how I did, maybe gives me some context of how I've done in the past, or how other people geared like me have done, or other people of my class have done, or something like that. But, something very similar to XIV analysis, or something where it gives me actionable things, so that when I have a reason to kind of add that replayability, when I run it again, can I run it better? He's running things for the first time and largely moving on, and is doing them all at minimum item levels. So the challenge is already there. You're either passing it or you're not, and it is inherently challenging. But for people that are running normal content over and over to get their tomestones and stuff, which is not a point of the game that he's made it to yet, I do think there would be some value added by some form of feedback. I think the ninja system, where maybe like an icon appears over my head when I'm doing things right, or maybe animations are just a little bit brighter, a little bit different when I'm finishing my combos, or when I'm doing things correctly, right? When I have my buff up and I'm finishing combos, something that kind of rewards that, or at least lets me know when I've made a mistake, when I break a combo, some kind of animation letting me know I've done something that can be improved. Is nice once the mechanics start to become second nature. He's finished A Realm Reborn, so he's seen the base level of mechanics. In Heaven's Word, we're going to add some more. In Stormblood, we're going to add some more, and so on. But we're going to see a lot of these mechanics carry forward, right? Once you've seen a stack marker, that's the stack marker we're still using in Eden today. Once you've seen an icon over your head, especially once you've seen numbered icons over your head, you've really largely seen that. And so occasionally they'll surprise us, when we move into different mechanics that we see for the very first time, but they're usually given to you in a relatively forgiving state and normal, where you see it done by itself and it won't kill you, and you see it done again maybe, or it's done alongside something else, and you have an opportunity to kind of figure out what it does. But once you've done that, you see those mechanics hundreds and hundreds of times, especially when you start to talk about people that go and farm for like tank mounts or something like that, where they're running fights just over and over and over and over, or they're grinding for tomestones, or they're grinding for a relic that's tied to that content or something like that, where you're about to go run this dungeon 10 times in a row. I wouldn't mind a little more feedback. I would say that could a lot be done through the UI, and the UI, I would literally put it as like base World of Warcraft, and then Final Fantasy, and then World of Warcraft with add-ons, because it's such a personal take, right? When you see flying text that feels good to you, when you see a debuff marker or something that feels good to you because it's a shape or a location or a certain amount of presence on the screen, or it's a certain color for people that, may have color blindness or just preference, even font choices and sizes and all these things, you can keep building out this settings menu. It's immensely complex now. They've added so many bars and tabs off the bars and checkboxes and scroll wheels, and there's menus within menus within menus, as they piled more and more and more onto this UI to continue to suit all of the different ways we want to play. But the add-ons in WoW have allowed them to say, you know what, I can just go find an add-on that fits my taste. And then if that's not your taste, you just don't install that whole add-on. You find a different add-on, and we're going to source that from all these people that are not paid by Blizzard to do this. That's a huge advantage that Final Fantasy gives up by not having mods, which opens up a whole other conversation, and it absolutely is understandable why they don't have add-ons. But that is one of the things you give up when you make that decision. And so I would say when you have a pain point with the UI, whether it be that he doesn't like the flying text, or that you don't like the way retainers work, or the way your interface works, or you don't like something about the quest log, like, it's very, very hard to go in and have immense control over that if your setting has not already been baked in. I will say to new players, they do those updates regularly, especially in the second half of an expansion when the UI team gets a little more time on their hands. We get a lot of these quality of life updates. They're not even always widely public. Every once in a while, it's not something, they have other big features going on, and during the live letter, our live announcements, the 2-part live letter for each patch, it may or may not get referenced, or it gets referenced in passing. And one day you're logged in and you're like, I don't know, I think my biggest problem with X piece of content is that my UI does this. And somebody's like, well, why don't you just change it? Oh my gosh, how long has that box been there? And it could have been months. And so I will say that if there is a pain point, just keep making those vocal. The UI team works very, very hard to take those in and say, okay, is there a way that we can do this that works for everybody, or a way that we can make a new alternative that will help improve this aspect of the experience for you? Because UI is one of those areas that you don't just touch at the beginning. It's not just like a bad new player experience, which is bad, but you get past. It's something that you live and breathe with every single time you log in. And so they do eventually get to it. Patience is going to be key.
So overall, I've had a really great time. I think the story has been very compelling to me, and especially now that we're entering into Heaven's Ward. And I'm now talking to... what's his name? Like, I'm thinking of his name, Count Dripula. Count Four Temps or something like that? I don't remember. But yeah, that's basically where we're at now in the story. I did the whole Dark Knight quest line. I think that was really fun. But it's funny for me to see that there's a lot of people that told me, oh, Realm Reborn is going to take you so long and you're going to get so bored. It's like, what do you mean? Like, I'm going to get bored? Like, this is literally...
It did take him so long. Like, I would love to see his slash play the moment he stepped into Heaven's Word. So just for that part, to be clear, that part was absolutely on point.
Quest, it takes me 15 minutes. Like, how am I going to get bored in 15 minutes? Like, you stupid? I did a achievement in WoW that required me to get 250,000 honorable kills, and in an entire day of farming, you would get maybe 1,000 or 2,000. Are you kidding me that I would get fucking bored? Not a chance. So I've really enjoyed that a lot, and I think all the little side activities.
Yeah, I wasn't worried about him saying that, like, when people are like, well, he won't finish. He does finish things. Like, so when he says this challenge, if he can't do it, it's because he physically can't do it. Like, they're underestimating how much the resolve is when you put the level of hours that he's willing to play in a day. Not just one day, not just, oh, I played for 10 hours or 15 hours one Saturday. But what happens when you do that day in and day out, and you don't get distracted, and you don't give up and play other games, and you don't get up and go do something else, and you just put in the work? The incredible amount of hours that he has across every version of, every expansion of World of Warcraft he's ever played, including Classic, is unreal. And the fact that he has played other games outside of that, and he's played those very thoroughly when he wants to. If he has a goal, it's not going to be... I don't know that bored would be the reason he wouldn't hit it.
These like the Gold Saucer, like the Chocobo Racing, etc. Now, I find those to be very fun as well, and it sounds stupid, but I'm actually really excited for the jumping puzzles in the game. Apparently there's one in Stormblood or something like that I'm going to be doing. I watched Rich fail on it for many hours. So either way, I'm just having a good time. I'm enjoying myself.
Anybody who tells you they can jump on that light pole is lying.
It's fun. I'm playing the game off stream and just trying to do what I want to do. And I've missed that a lot. Again, I think I say this in all of my videos as I'm wrapping everything up here. I'm not quitting WoW. I really enjoy WoW as well. But it's been great to be able to play something different and to have a different perspective on the game. And I think that it's helped me a lot. I really appreciate everybody who's been so supportive over this past month and everything, with just watching the streams and just being positive in general, not only with the Final Fantasy content, but with the stuff that I did with WoW. And
I think that that's the part I was most excited on. even if he literally just caught up to Shadowbringers, decided whether or not he was going to play Endwalker, and then was just done, pops back in seasonally to basically play through an expansion or play through a patch and be done, or maybe never comes back. I think one of the things I'm most excited about is when somebody who has a voice that is heard by as many people as his. I think there is something incredible about knowing that they're capable of representing your point of view as well, that they at least have some context, even if they don't agree with you, that they at least have some context. And so when you talk about industry leaders in content creation in World of Warcraft or Guild Wars or any game, having an awareness of what Final Fantasy XIV is doing and not just speaking out of some headline they saw or some passerby thought, or I sat in a stream for 4 minutes and I didn't like the way the game looked, or you played one song for me and it didn't mean anything. It doesn't allow them to represent the game that you do like really fairly at all. And not liking it is a fair thought. You do not have to like Final Fantasy XIV, but if you don't like it, you should not like it for legitimate reasons. There are legitimate reasons that it might not be for you. But it is really, really nice, and I was really excited to think, okay, now there will be somebody in the World of Warcraft space that when Final Fantasy XIV comes up, because it's going to come up, they can at least speak from a point of education. Even if they're saying they don't like it, even if they're explaining why World of Warcraft is better, they're not just saying, well, it's better because it's better and the other game is stupid. It's like, no, it's better because these are the things that I have found in Final Fantasy XIV through legitimate experience in the game. These are the things that I have found in World of Warcraft through legitimate experience in game. And when I compare these, this is how I think they hold up. That's very fair. That's a real point of discussion, and we can be adults about something as silly as a game, and we can have a real discussion and a real debate here instead of just name calling arbitrarily. So I was super excited to have somebody who would be more well versed in both games that does have an opportunity to be on various podcasts, whether it be his own with Allcraft or him going on other people's, or just when he puts out videos on either of his channels, or when he just streams anytime at all on either of his channels. Anytime these things come up, I think it's really important for people with lots of visibility to hopefully be able to decently represent more viewpoints than just their own. I think that's really awesome. And so if I had to shortlist Twitch creators that I think are given opportunities to talk about Final Fantasy that I would hope would have a legitimate experience in Final Fantasy to talk from, even if it's different than mine and they don't like it, he is definitely on that list, and I'm really excited to see that he's taking such a thorough time. And of course, I love that he loves the game, but even if he didn't, just the fact that he's taken it with this much respect and this much care says that even if he said he didn't like it, even if his least favorite things about the game were my favorite things, and his favorite things were mine, and we were on totally opposite ends, I'm really excited that he has chosen to put this much care and effort into getting a fair and reasonable view of it. And of course it feels good that he likes it, but even if he didn't, I just appreciate that it's at least fair.
And also the stuff that I did with New World too. And I look forward to doing more things like that are different and more variety focused in the future. And I really appreciate you guys giving me the confidence to be able to do that. So thank you. And I also look forward to doing Heavensward and getting, apparently if you get all the birds in Heavensward, you get like this massive like golden like mass, I don't know, like a golden Lugia pretty much. Like we're doing that one. That's gonna,
if you get all the extreme mounts, you get like a meta mount.
Happen 100%. And I'm having fun, man. It's really enjoyable for me to just go through the game in the very, very measured way that I have, and just take every experience one at a time and try to do everything in the most authentic way as I can. So either way, I want to say thank you guys all so much for watching. I've really enjoyed the game, and I look forward to apparently doing the fun part of the game, because I enjoyed the post A Realm Reborn content. I thought it was completely fine. So if that was fun and that was enjoyable for me, I fully expect that Heavensward will be 1,000 times better, and I look very much forward to doing it myself. So that's about all I've got. I've enjoyed myself a lot, and I look forward to doing a lot more. So until next time, boys, peace.
Authentic is the word. Thank you, Asmongold, for being authentic. Thank you, thank you so much for to anybody that takes the game seriously. Obviously, his is visible enough that we get to see it and interact with it directly through comment sections and our own opinions and discussions with friends. But to anybody getting into the game right now, to anybody getting into the game as we build towards Endwalker, it is an exciting time to be into the game, and the most we can ask is that you get a fair shake. If it's not for you, it's not for you, and that's totally okay. But taking time out of your whatever your schedule may be to spend time on a game, even if it's just the free trial, you're not spending any money, you're only giving your time. Your time is such a valuable resource that's so hard to come by. And so if you just give your time to have an authentic experience, even if you end up not enjoying it and you end up enjoying something else instead, that's awesome. I hope you find a game you enjoy. And I think that that's the most we could ask for. And if it's not for you, it's not for you. Of course, since it's something that Final Fantasy fans enjoy, we would love for you to enjoy it too. But if you don't, thank you for trying A Realm Reborn or whatever level of Final Fantasy you may try to whatever degree.